What's going on, family? Everybody on Facebook, anybody who'll see this on YouTube, or any other streaming platform, social media platform. My name is Wale Kimby. I'm 31 years old, Providence, Rhode Island native, and I'm sure unless you've been under a rock or living in the woods somewhere with no access to television, so on and so forth, you're more than aware of what's happening right now in the world. It is June 2nd, 2020, and we are living in a pandemic. The coronavirus, or COVID-19, has swept the world. People have been living in their homes for the last 3+ months. And last week in Minnesota, a young black man, youngish black man by the name of George Floyd, was murdered by a white police officer by the name of Derek Chauvin. The reason why that information is important is because this man, George Floyd, his murder has sparked national protest all over America. And those protests reached my city in Providence on Saturday, May 30th. And those protests on Saturday were super peaceful. 2,000 plus people attended, and it went off without a hitch. Some of the protesters were interviewed by the media, by the local media, and for the most part, all the interviews, positive things were said. People want to be heard, and the message of hope and change and reform, or the deconstruction of our current criminal justice system and our system of policing, was challenged. Fast forward 2 days later to last night, June 1st, Monday, June 1st, 2020, you have maybe a couple hundred folks, protesters also, but they organized to destroy property and vandalize the Providence Place Mall, local businesses downtown, and they set ablaze a police cruiser, a DCYF, a state vehicle, let's say that, and they vandalized several others. I think more than 11 vehicles were vandalized or set ablaze last night, and last night's riots. And the reason why I wanted to give my opinion via video and not write a long ass post is because for a week now, it's Tuesday right now, George Floyd was killed. I saw the video last Tuesday. I believe he was killed Monday or Sunday of last week. So his death is very fresh. It's still all over the national media and the local media in certain cities. And I've always been somebody who never really agreed with the idea of protesting in modern times, like in 2012, from like Trayvon Martin's death up till now. Protests are good for one thing and one thing only: spreading awareness of the message. But, and the only reason why I say but, to kind of like contradict this, is because we already know what the message is. We want police officers to not have the absolute power to take a life. More specifically, black and brown lives, because that's all we've been seeing. People who are empowered through the system or by the state to carry a gun and handcuffs and mace and a baton and, all the other tools that a police officer is indemnified with, knighted with by the state, and says, hey, here's a lethal weapon, here's a couple months of training, go out into communities that you're not familiar with and police the people that live there, rather than, protect and serve. There's a reason why a lot of folks jump at the notion of being a police officer in a major city. You know, on average, a city cop can make anywhere between 65 to, close to $90,000 with overtime. A local city cop in Providence base pay it's a little over close to 50K, maybe a little over that. But with overtime and doing details and you know being outside of a venue that's hosting a concert or doing a block party or patrolling the mall on the weekends and all that stuff, they get overtime for that kind of stuff. So on average, a big city cop or small city cop like in Providence, police officers can make annually close to, if not more than 80 grand a year. It's a very lucrative job. You get to carry a gun, um, and you get benefits from the city. You work for a municipality, so there's that, and you get just the fact that you're wearing that badge and that uniform without even acknowledging the gun. You're in a space where regular citizens who are sanitation workers or people who work in people who are baristas at the local coffee shop, they automatically look at you with some type of fear and not adoration, but just like I can't even say envy. They just look at you because they know the power that you have, and they fear you because they know the power that you have. You have the power to end their life, whether it be by taking it with your sidearm, with several of your knees, with whatever you so choose. Your baton to their throat, doesn't really matter. You have the power to take their life on a Monday and walk into work on a Tuesday. No arrests, no charges being drawn up against you. It is what it is. It's business as usual. And we've seen this way too frequently since 2012 in the slaying of Trayvon Martin. And I felt a lot of different emotions in the last 7 days. Most of them just frustration. I was angry when I first saw the video of George Floyd's assassination, but the anger does me no good at all. Because being angry, what does that solve for me? What does that solve for the young people that are coming after me that look like me? What does that do for the other men who look like me? Or the other women whom I might date or who I call, sister, auntie, cousin, you know what I mean? Friend. What does being angry do for me? And a lot of people have been mentioning the whole, what did an MLK say about this and the riots and all of this stuff? Let me be clear. I already said protests to me in 2020 aren't very helpful outside of spreading the message. In terms of an actionable item, like an actionable item and like a real deal takeaway that's going to affect political change, protests do none of that. You make noise, people hear you, and that's that. What's the next step? You know what I mean? And this is not to knock anybody or to judge anybody who takes place in protests anywhere. You go ahead and you do what you feel like you need to do. My thing is, if you're going to protest, then please follow it up with some type of action where you're talking to your local council people, you're talking to your local senators, your state senators, your federal senators, anybody in your local legislation, your mayor, make it count. You make noise, they see you, you get an interview on TV, you're leading a protest of 2,000+ people. Follow that up. If the city reaches out to you, answer the call. Talk to your local leaders. Talk to your local municipality and the administration, the mayor, whoever, the mayor's chief of staff. Sit down at the table with them and strategize on how you can change the laws or how you can improve community policing or whatever, like whatever the case may be. Because all of the hardcore Marxists and black radicalists and, the socialists who say, we don't need police. Listen, I agree. We shouldn't have police officers that carry guns. We shouldn't. I'm against it. I'm against guns, period. I'm a Kenyan pacifist. And I think I'm making that term up right now, but I'm a Kenyan pacifist. And a lot of y'all don't know what that means. But I've studied nonviolence since I was 14 years old. I'm 31 now. That means for 17 years, I've practiced a life of nonviolence. Not in the sense, not in the Gandhi sense where I can allow somebody to beat my head in until I'm dead, but in a sense where if my life is being threatened, I have the right to defend myself, to get out of that situation and nothing more. If somebody attacks you with a knife and you disarm that person of the knife, it is your responsibility to disarm them and then flee. Whether you got to run, whether you got to walk, whether you got to jog to your car, jump in it, and drive away. It is not your responsibility to disarm this person of the knife and then stab them with that knife. Because now you have become the offender. You have become the aggressor. And with Dr. King's theory, his principles, his steps of nonviolence, that is against those principles. That is against those steps. It's against that way of life. And that's how I choose to live my life. So when I see people fighting violence with violence, when I see people voluntarily going out into my city that I've lived my entire life, breaking windows, setting cars ablaze, breaking into the mall that I shop at, the mall that my family, my friends' families, my friends, my partners, my collaborators, my community activists, my everybody shops at this mall. And to see a group of, couple hundred folks break in and, trying to break into stores and breaking windows and trying to steal free things, for what? How does that progress our conversation? How does that help us in our strategy to try to hold police officers accountable? How? How does this do that? How does setting one squad car on fire in downtown Providence, how does that help us hold them accountable? You know what's crazy? I got a phone call. From one of my brothers, close friend of mine. I've known this man since college. Called me about an hour ago, asked me if I was going out into the city today for anything. I was like, nah, man, I had no plans to go out. Be in the house. There ain't nothing to do but go out and pick up food anyway. And he tells me, well, I just got a phone call, from my superior. I'm being activated. So I have to go put my uniform on, load up, load my gun up with some rubber bullets, and I'm heading to Prov. He's in the Air Force, branch of the military. That's what he's been ordered to do today, Tuesday, because of last night's shenanigans. So again, while I'm not telling people not to do something, I understand you're angry. You do what you see fit. But you understand that the things that are happening in Philly, Chicago, Atlanta, Minnesota, Providence, Houston, Dallas, all of these major cities where people are throwing the tear gas back at the cops and burning their cars and breaking into the substations and setting them on fire. Listen, you do what you do. I'm not mad at you. I'm not knocking you. I'm not judging you. But understand this. You doing that is going to create more of a problem for everyone that lives in your community because they have something you do not. And that is the absolute power to take your life. If you got guns, cool. Oh, if you're responsible, I got guns. I ain't worried about the cops. They ain't the only ones with guns. That's fine. You might have a couple handguns laying around in the crib, But if you fire at a police officer and, God forbid, hit or kill one of them, what do you think that does to you? If you don't get caught in that moment, everybody that lives in your neighborhood or in your city that looks like you is going to become a victim because of your decisions. And it's stupidity at the end of the day. It's stupidity at the end of the day. Because you give a cop a reason by burning their car on fire. That's enough reason for any cop to take out, a gun with rubber bullets and shoot you in the head with it, or to throw tear gas at you, or to spray you in the face, with pepper spray or mace. That's enough. You burn a squad car? I mean, come on, man. That's all the excuse they need. But now I just told y'all, we got people in the military that are gearing up to be in this city patrolling in the downtown area because they know that that's going to be the high focus of a lot of the protests that are going to be happening in response to George Floyd's assassination. And I just implore people to pay attention, man. Pay attention, understand what you're doing. Do not be a trendy, hop on the bandwagon following ass motherfucker who just, oh, we're doing this now. We protesting. All right, let me blend in with the protest, and then when nobody's looking, I'm just gonna break off and break into the mall and try to get me something from the Apple store. Like, don't be that person. And if you know somebody who's trying to masquerade as a protester to do these things, please call them out on it. A lot of folks that are doing this stuff right now, that are in the protests and that are marching, have no idea about the history of why protesting is powerful in the first place. Y'all cite Martin Luther King, y'all cite Malcolm X. Y'all really don't know what these two men stood for. If Martin Luther King Jr., after he got desegregation in the South and was successful in his endeavors to liberate the South from the in-your-face racism via the Jim Crow laws, his next step was trying to unify the poor white and black and brown farmers in the South. He tried to unionize them so they could fight for their rights and get paid what they rightfully deserved from our government for making all of our food, for farming all of our food. And that's why he was killed. Had nothing to do with desegregating the South. That was going to happen anyway. Might not have happened in the 60s, but it was going to happen because times change for the most part. You know what I'm saying? Malcolm X, he doesn't get murdered. He doesn't get assassinated by his own people, by black people, by Muslims, if he does not go against the words of the Nation of Islam. It doesn't happen. If he doesn't go against Elijah Muhammad vocally, out loud in public, he doesn't get a hit put on him from the feds. His organization doesn't get infiltrated by the feds. He does not get assassinated while he's giving a speech in front of his new followers. It doesn't happen. Y'all cite these men, y'all cite the things that they did, but y'all don't know the history behind why these men are now no longer with us. Y'all don't know the work that they actually put in. Y'all have no idea that on May 2nd, 1963, was the start of DDay. Not DDay in World War II, not Saving Private Ryan DDay. I'm talking about Civil Rights DDay. I'm talking about Jim Crow DDay. I'm talking about Birmingham, Alabama DDay. Look it up. 1963. Beginning of the month of May. 500 children, over 500 kids in Birmingham, Alabama were locked up in one day because they were protesting Bull Connor. You don't know who Bull Connor is? Google him. Bull Connor was a tyrant. He was a racist tyrant that ran the police department in Birmingham, Alabama, like it was his own private military. And he let heinous and violent acts against black people take place in Alabama, particularly Birmingham, every single day. By white folk, by white police officers, And there was never any justice. There was never any accountability. So Martin Luther King, along with some of his other advisors and other people that were members of the Southern Leadership Christian Conference, Southern Christian Leadership Conference, SCLC, they mobilized. They couldn't do anything themselves because they had things to lose. The adults couldn't get locked up. So the kids stepped up. The kids stepped up and they got locked up. And by the end of D-Day, D-Day started in early May. And by the fourth day, close to 10,000 kids got locked up. They overwhelmed the prison system. They overwhelmed it. And they had to be let go. And this was the last tactical blow on the segregated South in the Jim Crow era. Because thousands of children, they volunteered to get sprayed with fire hoses, mauled by dogs, beaten in the head by police, chased in the street, dragged through the grass of their local parks like animals. And it was televised by the media, showcased by the press, sparked national outcry, and then President JFK had no choice but to end Jim Crow and to desegregate the South. On paper, anyway, because we know we still go to certain areas in the South and it still feels like the 1950s down there, like civil rights South. But that's why these kids volunteered to go to jail in large numbers to overwhelm their local prison system and ultimately get a tyrant removed from office. We don't have that same type of discipline right now. We don't have it. We're angry. We're not strategic at all. We're acting out of emotion. We want people to feel our anger, and that's okay. You have to make sure, though, that you're putting everything into perspective. Because if you come at the police, it doesn't matter what you throw at them. They could throw 10 times that back at you. And the police, they ain't by themselves. I told you. My Air Force buddy is activated. He's on standby to come down to Providence with his gun and his rubber bullets and all of his peoples. The military, the National Guard. And they all have guns. I don't care if there's 3,000 Providence citizens that have registered weapons. There's about 15,000 of them with bigger weapons, tanks, all that. We don't got no tear gas. I ain't got no smoke mask to be running through all that. You just got to be smarter about this shit, man. You're putting the lives of normal citizens at risk. Not to mention, we're still in a pandemic. You can still get sick out here. Y'all bucking in a pandemic. Y'all breaking people's shit in a pandemic. Y'all can still get sick. You still got loved ones. Violence only begets more violence. An eye for an eye leaves the world blind. Those words are truer today than they were from the person who first put pen to paper and wrote them. I don't know if there's anything else to say. It's going to take some serious sacrifice to get true justice. I don't think y'all know what that means, man. There's going to be a lot more George Floyds. Just like there were more Jimmy Jacksons. People are going to really have to die. Really have to make that ultimate sacrifice for ultimate change to happen. People are going to have to stop bucking on the streets and throw on your Sunday's best. Take your ass to the State House when they're in session and listen to the laws that are being voted on that are ultimately going to affect the way that you live as a taxpaying citizen, the way that your kids live, the way that you live if you're just a single adult. Couple days a week, they're in session. Tuesdays and Thursdays, every week. They're voting on bills. And if those bills get passed, they become laws. You have no idea what they're doing, do you? You don't know what time the sessions are because you don't care. Right now, you just want to be angry. You want to be out on the street. You want people to hear your message. You want people to hear your voice. And it's like, that's all good for right now. What happens when the media gets tired of this George Floyd case? What happens when George Floyd becomes the next victim? Are y'all still gonna buck? We found out about Ahmaud Arbery. Everybody was upset, but there were no protests. Why is that? There were no protests at all. Why is that? People were angry. Somebody started a trend and motherfuckers was running 3.5 miles for Ahmaud and all of this. But there were no protests. Breonna Taylor, she got killed in her own house. It's a couple weeks ago. There were no protests. So what makes George Floyd different from Ahmaud Arbery or Breonna Taylor? I'm just asking. I have no idea. Is it because the national media is paying more attention to George Floyd's death and we actually saw it versus only hearing about what happened to Breonna Taylor? We saw Ahmaud Arbery's killing, but that was just two racist ass white men. That wasn't a police officer, even though all three of these white men, including Derek Chauvin, the police officer who assassinated George Floyd, are all protected under the same privilege, under the same system of white patriarchy, white skin, white privilege. I'm black, but they white. They're all protected under the same system that protected George Zimmerman or the NYPD officers who killed Ramarley Graham, or the California cops that killed my man in Oakland.